Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at what a lot of people are now thinking might be the way to play Sapphire Steel after Jonathan Lamb's impressive showing coming in top 4 at DLC Melbourne. We have here an updated list of what I guess you would call more traditional Sapphire Steel, so I know a lot of innovation have tried to make this deck change its identity, but Jonathan Lamb Chops, has stuck with its original, we go for the whole new world plays with the Fishbone Quills. And so this deck obviously can be built in a number of different ways. This version here that I have on screen that I was testing is not the same as Jonathan Lamb's. We've covered that in the meta report as well. But I do want to cover this deck list and why it's something that you might be interested in playing, and then we'll take a look at a couple of quick simulations that actually showcase some of the cool interactions with this deck. So starting off for characters, we've got 35. We've got Robin Hood on 1, Tipo and Smee at 4 ofs and 2, and Jonathan only played 1 Tipo. We've got 3 of the John Silver, and this is actually an important card in the meta right now. And again, we are shifting into set 7, but for now, and even into set 7 maybe, this card could still be relevant for a number of different reasons. The main thing you might be thinking is, yeah, we know Quantum, it's been discussed already, this is a captain, it's a pirate, whatever, so it has synergy to stop the damage on Smee. Yeah, that's true, and you could play Cogsworth, which, Jonathan Lamb was playing, I'm not playing, to also help facilitate that. But what's even more interesting about a card like this is it stops the Maui Shark from challenging. So we've seen over that DLC in Melbourne that, and even in the North American DLC with red-blue players, they drop the Shark, and these aggro decks or decks that need to turn their cards sideways in order to win the game basically struggle once the Maui Shark hits the board. They need to have the removal for it or force the opponent to basically be prepared their own board, which is what happened in the North American Championships. Well, John Silver can buy you a turn, similar to how Pete can buy you a turn against something like a Be Prepared. You opt to play John Silver instead of the Pete, and now you have a very unique interaction where you can afford to turn your card sideways in the face of a Maui Shark because it won't be able to challenge. Yes, it will still gain lore when the opponent plays actions, and yes, it can still quest, but that's much better than them generating a ton of advantage, right? We saw what happened, for example, in the Clement Jesse match where, that big ruling controversy happened, but you saw how much advantage when I broke that down that Clement gained off of challenging with his Shark in that interaction, getting back the action that scries to develop your brain and then turn that into a brand new card, and then facilitate even more card draw through a popsicle, which led him into another Shark, and it just snowballs from there. So the John Silver can be a really important interaction for that as well, and you have natural synergy with the Smee. On the 4, we only play Hiram. On the 5, we're playing 2 copies of Gontu just as a standalone big airboat's a big body character that's inkable, and you could argue that you could play Gontu over the aerial because usually you'll have more items than your opponent, but this being uninkable does hurt a little bit. You can see here we are playing 15, so I'm kind of torn. I was testing both, and the aerial is obviously nice because of the ward factor, and it's basically reverse stats on the Gontu. So you can pick whichever one you want. You want to sacrifice the fact that it's being inkable and it costs 1 more for the fact that it has ward, versus the Gontu being in the middle, not questing for 5 but not questing for 3 either, and also having the 4 lore, which is just like a standalone thing. So yeah, you can pick and choose which one you want, but both are good lucky charm targets as well. And then kind of the secret engine of the deck, and this honestly performed a lot better than I thought it would. The Pyros, it's a 5/4 body that costs 5 and it's inkable. So there's a couple of good things going for it. 1, it costs 5, so it can sing all of the important 5-cost steel songs like Grab Your Swords and A Whole New World, Zeus, etc. 5 strength, very hard to deal with, right? Doesn't get brawled or Seasuit or anything like that, or Medusa, etc. The 4 willpower is also pretty nice. I mean, it still gets traded out by Mim Fox, but the goal is that this card shouldn't be exerted, right? It's going to ready itself up and protect itself. But also it does get outed by opposing Zeuses, and that's pretty much it, right? Double Storm Sing by Ursula, Deceiver of All, yes. But in general, it's just a decent card, like a decent statted card for its having this nice effect. And it's not like reckless or anything, so it could quest as well. But you'll mostly be using it to clear boards, and we'll discuss how we do that in a moment. And because I'm playing the Robin Hood package, I did opt to put in the Champion of Sherwood. I do like this card. I think it still has place in the meta, especially into opposing steel decks. If you're not going to go with the Cogsworth package, which again, you could opt to say that that's the stronger package instead of playing Robin Hoods. Cogsworth is also good because it gives resist to your characters. Obviously it costs 5, but this being shifted out early potentially, and also being a card that really just answers things like Call Hoon very nicely, which, Cogsworth helps, gives you some resiliency against the Call Hoon, but still, Call Hoon is a bit of an issue for the early part of this deck here. The Robin Hood positively trades out into the Call Hoon, right? They need to throw 2 Call Hoons into it, and then you'll trade out both of their Call Hoons, for example, if that's the case. And then just it's a card that really helps clean up aggro quite nicely, especially if you can boost its strength. Which, if you're not playing the Imperial Bow, I mean that's fine, but you can do it with an Arthur. This card is the main combo piece, and one of the reasons why I opted to play the Robin Hood package over the Cogsworth. Because instead of just using it with Pyros, which is mainly what you'd use it for, I mean, you could use it with anything technically, right? But ideally, you want to use it with your most valuable cards, and that's going to be like the Pyros Lava Titan. And hopefully I'm saying the name right? Pyros? Hopefully. Apologies if I'm not. But using this with Robin Hood is also very nice. Being able to make this a 5/6 with Resist 2 and have it challenge readied characters is an instant way to gain 2 lore as well, right? In a challenge, you out a very important threat on your opponent's side, let's say, by challenging a readied character, being a 5/6. Take probably no damage or very little damage in the process, and then you also gain 2 lore. Pretty nice interaction overall. And you could opt to say, like, could I play 0 to hero and things like that? Or, no, sorry, is it... What is that? What is... I can't believe I forgot the name of the 3-cost action that is basically the song version of what... One Last Hope, sorry. Of what the King Arthur is. The chosen character gains resist +2. If a hero is chosen, they may also challenge ready characters. So the Pyros is not a hero. The Robin Hood is. So you can't use the Pyros to clear an entire board and keep readying itself, because it won't be able to challenge the ready characters. Versus under the King Arthur proccing that ability, you will be able to. So that's pretty nice. And that does it for the characters. Again, the Aerial versus the Gontu, up to you. If you want to play less Uninkables, go to the Gontu. If you want the power of Aerial with the ward, which is very strong, I will say, then, stick with the Aerial. And then 3 Tamatoas, of course. Don't necessarily need 4, because your goal is that you have a lot of other cards that you could have as dime targets. The real benefit of the Tamatoa is honestly just the item recursion, really. Also just being another top end body. So you're quite high on the top end, but you do have a number of very good inkable cards on the top end. I mean, these being your uninkables. If you cut the Aerials, you can maybe go 1 more Gontu, 1 more King Arthur, and just have that much more firepower for clearing boards out. Again, depending on your metagame. Obviously into like red-blue, which is probably the most popular deck, you don't need the Pyros board wipes because those decks don't go wide. But, being a 5/4 body, it helps out locations too, right? That is something to keep in mind. So that is a significant interaction. Putting 5 damage into a location, really huge. Onto the songs, we are playing 11. No just straight up actions. All the actions are songs. No sales or anything like that. 2 Let It Goes for the instant removal factor. We've seen the value of this card. Din kind of showed this. Saving the tempo, being able to sing it. You don't really care about ramping your opponent usually, because you'll be so far ahead with your Fishbones and hopefully your card advantage with the whole new worlds. You just want to out the threat, and once you out the critical threat, you're feeling pretty good because you should have a better board than they do. The Zeus's, really versatile with locations being a thing. Libraries and McDuck Manors, etc. Dealing just 5 damage and then finishing it off with characters, pretty good. Also the card that still hits Genie, which is prevalent in a lot of the Amethyst decks still. 4 copies of A Whole New World. Because you play 4 Tipo and 4 Fishbone Quill, you can afford to brick on 2 of these and ink one of them with those cards, since you do play 8 ways to ink uninkables, which is nice. But you have to be very careful with this card, especially if your opponent is aware you're playing this, if you go into games 2 or 3, for example. Because it will benefit your opponent just as much as it benefits you, if not benefit your opponent even more. So you have to be very strategic where you want to play this, and oftentimes you will just end up inking it off of Fishbone and off of Tipo. Use that negative into a positive, right? Unlike decks like Steel Song, where they have to play the Whole New World, that's one of the things that this deck has kind of going for it. It's like your opponent may be like, oh, he's going to play the Whole New World, I better like empty my hand and just play very aggressive. And then, you slowly deal with their board. Maybe you Pyros wipe it, and then they have nothing on board. And then you're like, yeah, I'm actually not playing a whole new world. In fact, I'm just going to keep inking it, and I'll just use like my Hiram draw engine in order to draw through my deck, right? Like that's totally acceptable. And then because you play 8 of the cantrip items too, you're also just replacing these cards and not generating card advantage, but although technically you are, because you still have this on field while you draw a card, and then if you Hiram it away, that's another +2. So that's really, really strong. And then 2, grab your swords. You can argue that you don't necessarily need this, but the aggro decks, when they go first, definitely is still a tough match, because this end game package is very late in the game for like an aggro matchup for you to set this up, so they could definitely run away with the game in the meantime. So you definitely still need ways to slow them down, and with you ramping, you should be able to do that. Again, the thing with the aggro decks is they empty their hands out very quickly, obviously, and whole new worlding them is also pretty dicey. So again, you have to really know how to use this card, and in those matchups, maybe you don't use it, right? Maybe you just say like, yeah, I'm gonna whittle myself down to a few cards as well and just try to play through it. I can't afford to give an aggro deck 7 new cards when they're already on like 4 or 5 ink, and they can just play like 3 or 4 interactions in a turn. So again, knowing your matchups and knowing your correct plays in those matchups is very important. And then for the items here, again, you could opt to fit in Imperial Bows if you want to. We're on a straight 60, and I opted not to in this one. We're on the 4 Fishbones again, 4 Popsicle, 4 Fortisphere, and 2 Lucky Dime. This is your your non-questing source of lore. You definitely want to be able to find this and see this. You shouldn't need to play the Vision of the Future, although if you wanted to, you could maybe replace a whole new worlds for them, for example, if you'd rather scry into your deck instead of just redrawing. But that's why you don't necessarily need it, because you're going to see your Lucky Dime through cycling through your deck with a whole new world if you play it, or if you don't end up playing the whole new world, through Hiram. And in those matchups where you don't need to see the Lucky Dime, you can probably afford to play the whole new world, right? Did I say that correctly? So let's say like you're up against an Amethyst deck where they have a big hand. You're like, yeah, I'm going to be whole new worlding, and so I want to find my dime in those matchups because I don't want them to outrace me and then grind me out with like goats and white roses. So you do need to whole new world and find Lucky Dime. That matches up. In matchups like against aggro, the Lucky Dime is very slow, so I don't need to find it necessarily, and I don't need to be playing my whole new world, so that lines up. I can ink both of these in off of like T-Pose and Fishbone Quills. So yeah, that's the concept of the deck. It seems to synergize pretty well on curve. It should play very nicely also. Let's go ahead and jump into a couple of simulations, and you can kind of see what I mean when I talk about these interactions. Okay, so in this first matchup, we're going to be on the draw against an Amber Steel Mine deck. I think I pulled this one directly from the Canio CCS winning list from a while ago. More or less, all the lists are pretty similar to this one. Here you can see they start off with a turn 1 happy, so that's actually not too bad for us. That's probably the worst one drop that they could get, honestly. I'm thinking what else, like Cindy. Well, Cindy and there's, speaking of which, there it is actually not too good against us unless we go turn 1 Robin Hood. But because we see the Cindy now, if we did want to deploy the turn 2 Robin Hood along with the Popsicle, which is looking like what we're doing here, there's actually a big risk if they do have the Storm or Strength, because it's pretty telegraphed here that I am going for the Shift Robin Hood line, so you could argue that that wasn't really a good play. I probably was better off trying to ramp with the Tipo and then having the Tipo be a card that could trade into one of the Happies to slow them down. They do have a really slow start though, because they don't start with the Daisy, and then the 2 1-drops on turn 2 opposed to like a turn 2 Smee or something is fine. They do end up getting the Piglet on board though, which is a bit of an issue. So as expected, I do shift the Robin Hood on 3 and take out the Cinderella, gaining 2 lore in the process and stopping any songs from being sung by that Cinderella. Down comes the Calhoun, and there you can see what their hand was. So just a bunch of characters, which isn't necessarily bad for an Amber Steel deck. They are already at 9 lore, and these piglets really put the hurt on with their 3 lore. So we definitely have to deal with that. So much so that you're going to see me use the Zeus to take out the readied piglet, because I just can't afford them. I can't afford for them to quest with it. And then I challenge the piglet, taking a total of 3 damage on the Robin Hood here. Now, this interaction here, instead of having the Calhoun just trade out my Robin Hood and gain 2 lore in the process, yes, I'll draw a card. If I use the Popsicle, I'll essentially trade Popsicle for one of their Happies as well, because they'll need to put their Happy into the Robin Hood as well as the Calhoun in order to get the Robin Hood off the board, which they definitely want to do. So I effectively trade a Popsicle for a Happy, which I'm totally fine with, getting a draw in the process. They top deck the Pete, so they play that, not going to be too detrimental to us at all. And then the Happy quest for 1. And we're looking pretty good. They're at 12, we are at 4, and we don't really have a way to interact with this board at this moment. but it's generally going to be okay. You can see me opt to play the Fishbone Quill because I'm not going to whole new world them. So like I talked about in the deck profile, we're going to go ahead and ink that and just use our other card draw options, speaking of which there is a Hiram, in order to keep our hand, well, not super healthy, but healthy enough in this matchup. The quest for 2 off the Pete and the Happy aren't really too threatening. The top deck Lilo is a bit of an issue, and this is what I mean when I say this game just needs more ways to deal with like readied characters. I shouldn't be losing to just the opponent top decking and playing their character, right? There should be ways to layer your interactions, and I think we will see that over time. Speaking of which, we do see this Grab Your Swords, which I'm opting not to play yet, which is very strange. I take out the Pete because it is the 3 willpower character, so it will not get taken out by my Grab Your Swords, which I plan to play next turn, unfortunately being 1 ink short of playing either the Gontu or the Grab Your Swords last turn, which is actually really bad in terms of efficiency, right? Unfortunately, but it is what it is. Here you can see that they played a Storm Rage and then just inked, I think, Akita that they top decked. So we quest with the Hiram. We don't even need the Pyros line in this particular instance. You will see that in the second matchup that I show if you're interested in that, I believe. But we're going to go ahead and just continue inking and just develop a board. Now we have the opponent on nothing. We play the Robin Hood over the Gontu here because we do expect them to continually bring back the Lilo. Forcing interaction with my Robin Hood, either I'm questing with it or I'm challenging. So if they have nothing else to play, why not just bring back the Lilo? So this works out for us. We don't need the Fishbone anymore. We've got the ramp off of it already. So we're going to go ahead now and drop the Tamatoa, and we're just about ready to close out this game. The opponent is on 17, so this is where things like blue and stuff can really help clutch out a win for Amber Steel. And it'll be scary if this in combination gets other non-questing sources of lore in the future, which they probably will, because it's very easy for this ink combo now to get to this like 15-16 mark. Every other ink pairing, you know, is going the way of Amethyst, where there's these like non-interactable ways to gain lore. And if we want to combat that, I think we need to see lore drain in more than just the Ruby decks, which, you know, I talked about this a long time ago, and you saw it happen with Dinka Fam's deck, right? The lore drain being another angle of attack that Ruby has, but yeah, we'll see. Anyways, here I do have to interact with their board. And I have a number of different ways to do so. We start off by questing with the Hiram and the Tamatoa, I think it was. I kind of missed it as I was talking through that. I use the King Arthur for no reason. I should have taken out the Smee, but I take out the Lilo. Like, it's fine, I guess. I have resist 2, so my Robin Hood takes no damage. I gain the 2 lore in the process, and I have game next turn. The opponent can only go up to 19. With what they have on board here, and with no way to gain instantaneous lore, I think we're pretty safe to win the game next turn. There's almost nothing. I think there is actually nothing that the opponent can do here to win. So they play a mine, bring back the Lilo, play a mine, and we're just gonna quest with the Arthur for 3, quest with the Tamatoa for game, or okay, well, to 19, get back a Popsicle. Oh my gosh, and then yeah, just do some stuff instead of questing for game. Sure, just go quest. There you go. And on to the next match. So in the next matchup here, we're going to be going up against the DLC Melbourne winning list. That's Stinkafam's Red-Blue. That was focused more on Shark and McDuck Manor burn, I guess you could say. It's going to be a tough matchup for you. Any red deck, I think, with Sapphire Steel is going to be a little tough now. But again, with the metagame changing and these decks being configured in different ways, there is still some room for you to edge out wins in particular scenarios. With this deck, there is a weakness with the red-blue deck, right? You can see here, you know, we're playing pretty fast. We have to match their ramp when they TPO. We have to TPO because since they were on the play, we can't let them basically get 2 turns ahead. We don't quest with the Robin Hood because we feared the Goofy. They did ink it and play the Hiram instead for the card draw. And this is one of the cruxes of the red-blue deck, is I think it runs out of advantage very quickly. So if you are able to deal with their board and slow them down, you can potentially just make it very hard for them to close out the game. Yes, they do still have things like Pirate's Life, which can buy them time and clutch games out, same with the Goofies, but if you're able to shut down the core engine of the Shark and not let them gain 3, 4, 5 lore in a turn off Shark, as well as deal with the McDuck Manor, so there's a lot to deal with still, you can definitely have a chance in making this matchup work for you. The thing you have to always be wary of is to be prepared, especially with the McDuck Manors, right? That's what's going to hurt you a lot. So here I take the risk and I end up abandoning, you know, trying to maintain character advantage and just say if you have the Mauis and the Goofies and whatnot, so be it, I have to deal with this manner. And this is where the Pyros actually comes into play. That 5 strength is really big, right? And it can do some serious damage into pretty much all of the meta right now, right? Into all the Amethyst decks, right? Amethyst Steel, Ruby Amethyst, etc. Yeah, 5 strength is really, really, you know, a good stat line. The four willpower hurts a little bit because, again, you do get traded out by Mim Fox, but it's still, you know, manageable. So here I have a very unique situation where I could opt to deal with the manner and regenerate the card advantage, since the opponent has a very healthy hand, thanks to the Hiram plus the Grandma, Scry, etc. They've developed themselves into a really good position. Despite being a CPU, they got the mana up, they've got characters to deal with, and they're ahead on lore, right? And this is, again, the advantage of being on the play and seeing the Hiram. Here you can see that I opt to use the Pyros to take out the Hiram, which allows me to ready it up again, use the Pyros to take out the Tipo. So unlike what you saw in the finals of that DLC match, if you watched it, in the red-blue mirror, the Tipos were questing for like 3-4 lore in those games. Like, the Tipo was running away with the game. So here I opt to let the McDuck Manor live. The opponent did indeed have a Be Prepared, so that's 1 out of 4 gone. But now we're definitely at risk of them playing Be Prepared here. We probably want to, well, I don't know if we need to save the John Silver here necessarily. I mean, I've talked about this being a counter to the Maui Shark, so we're going to play it and prevent the Grandma from questing, and then throw 1 damage into the McDuck Manor so that the Pyros can finish it off next turn. It's very likely that if the opponent has it Be Prepared here, they play it, but we're much happier to see that Super Goof come in. It's probably going to take out the Tipo, gain some lore, go up to 10, and now I have 2 McDuck Manors to deal with. But with 2 3-strength characters and the Pyros, you know, it's still not enough to have 2 characters go into 1 manor. I'll need to put all 3 into like the healthy manor, for example, because 3 plus 5 is 8, and then the other 3 is going to be 11 damage total. So obviously the plan is going to be use the Pyros to take out a character, have it ready itself back up, and then use it to throw itself into the McDuck Manor. And this is, again, the value that you get off this card. It's also a card that can help you take out locations as well, right? Characters and locations. So get some good value there off the Pyros, healed it up, right? So I can continue to utilize it. Use the Robin Hood in order to take out the other character, and then use the John Silver in order to put damage into the McDuck Manor. I drop a Hiram trying to, I mean, I don't really need to do anything else to bait out a Be Prepared here, but since I have so much card advantage, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable in going a little bit more aggressive here, because if they didn't Be Prepared last turn, my guess is they probably just don't have it. And this is what happens sometimes, right? I mean, they probably need to play their scry cards to get it. They are at a point, though, where they could play things like visions and stuff in order to scry and still play the Be Prepared, so there is that to consider. But clearly, the opponent just doesn't have the Be Prepared, and that's just how these matchups go sometimes. Once you've seen your opponent go through, you know, 2 or 3 Be Prepared, so you make them discard them, you're actually in an advantageous spot. I remember back when I was going to League, back at Set 2's meta, I was playing Sapphire Steel, and, you know, I beat a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks. I was right, you know, it was a tier 0 format for Ruby Amethyst, but I was still playing Sapphire Steel for the simple fact that, like, I would exhaust the Be Prepared. I put them in positions where they had to be prepared. Those were long and grindy games, but it was an effective strategy for you to beat Ruby Amethyst to a certain degree. Here, I'm utilizing Fishbone to ink the Grab Your Swords, though, because it's just not a high-value card in this matchup. The opponent is only on 13 lore, so they're not close to closing out the game. Again, we do have to be fearful of things like the Pirate's Life with the Maui Sharks gaining, like, instantaneous lore. So, you know, you're never really safe, but we have a big enough board where we can start maybe pushing our advantage. Again, playing very risky here, but essentially we have to hope for our win condition, or one of our main win conditions, which is the Lucky Dime. A Brawl and a Let It Go come in, and then a second Maui comes down. The opponent is going to be able to clean up this board quite nicely. There's the Develop, they grab a card, but they're only on 2 cards now. And again, with only playing 4 Popsicles and 3 Hirams, they don't really have too much of a card draw engine. They really do rely on Shark and, you know, it generating advantage in order to claw back into the game in terms of the card advantage. But with our hand here, and us playing Zeus's and stuff like that, we have ways to instantly answer things like the Shark and the Let It Goes as well, right? So that's a real positive that this deck has going for it into like a Shark air quotes meta. The Zeus and the Let It Goes for Sapphire Steel can really slow down the Shark oriented strategies, but again, red blue is just a very powerful combination for the fact that you've seen it. Like, they haven't needed to quest really at all, right? Their lore has mostly come from like the McDuck Manors, a little bit of questing, but there was almost no Shark play in this match, which is kind of weird because you would think like, yeah, normally there should be Shark play, but I think every time that they could have played Shark, like, we had the answer, right? We had like the Prince John to stop it from challenging, so we can continue to quest and challenge. We had the Let It Go, we had the Zeus, etc. Down comes another McDuck Manor. They ink the Pirate's Life, which, you know, you probably don't do in a real match, but I mean, it would only put them to 15, but it would put me to 6. Dropping the Tipo here, you know, not really high value. I'd probably just end up keeping the Pirate's Life in my hand. And I guess the Tipo can represent, you know, questing power. Instead of trying to set up some kind of board clear with the Pyros, we're going to go aggressive with the Tamatoa and hope, well, yeah, because we have the Lucky Dime up, and this is Sapphire Steel's win condition. If you're opting to play this version of the deck, you can definitely focus on putting your high lore characters on board, because once you've stabilized an estate like this, like I know the opponent's going to go to 15 with the Manor, 16 with the Tipo, and even if they top deck another Pirate's Life, like, they won't be able to win the game. But next turn I can definitely win the game, even if I get, you know, lore drained, simply because, and there's I think that's the 4th Manor in this match, but because I have the Aerial that will quest for 5, and then I have, I mean, I play this stupid at the end here, but it doesn't matter. Like, I could have obviously played the Popsicle in my hand first. I have a second Dime now that I can deploy. I have enough ink to play the second Dime and activate both the dimes, and that alone will like win me the game, because that's like 15 lore in a single turn off the Aerial alone, let alone the Tamatoa. So yeah, it's a foregone conclusion here. We end up winning this game. But again, take this with a grain of salt. It is just simulations, but it's just showing you what this deck can do. Kind of interesting. Thank you if you made it this far in the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Quantum is out.